Tony Orlando was at the top in 1990, with millions in the bank, honors in Vegas, and a star on the Walk of Fame. However, the truth about what nearly destroyed him is now being revealed. From suing for $35 million to standing on a hotel ledge and preparing to jump. He didn't want this sinister tale to be revealed. And the most startling aspect? The last person anyone expected to contact was the one who saved his life. Tony Orlando was born on April 3, 1944, in the center of New York City, and his journey begins there. Michael Anthony Orlando Cassavetes was his true name. He was raised in Hell's Kitchen, a neighborhood notorious for its gritty streets and the hardships of the working class. Life was difficult, despite the fact that his mother was Puerto Rican and his father was Greek. Gang activity was rampant on the streets, and money was seldom plentiful. Every day was a survival lesson. Taking care of his sister Rhonda, who had cerebral palsy, was Orlando's one duty that influenced him the most throughout it all. He remained focused on his family even while many of the children around him went into trouble. He was a carer at home. There was music all around him outside. American rock and roll blended with Latin rhythms, while doo-wop groups practiced in stairwells. He heard it everything. He formed his own band, the Five Gents, when he was 15. He knew he wanted to be a part of music, but he had no idea where it would lead him. Everything changed when I was 16. One of the most well-known figures in the music business, Don Kirshner, saw Orlando sing and recognized something in him. He hired him to sing on other artists' demo songs. He was at the center of the action, even though it wasn't glamorous. Record labels took notice of him right away because of his smooth voice and inherent charisma. His breakthrough hit, Halfway to Paradise and Bless You, came in 1961. Although both songs were on the charts, Bless You was the biggest hit, peaking at number 15 in the US. And reaching number 5 in the United Kingdom. Orlando rose to prominence as a teen idol as his music began to be played on the radio and his reputation in the business grew. Young admirers fell in love with his voice and youthful appearance when he appeared on American Bandstand, the most popular music show at the time. Before long, he was performing for well-known acts like Bobby Vee and Clarence Frogman Henry on tour in the UK. It all appeared to be moving in the right way. However, his career began to wane as soon as it took off. By 1963, popular music was shifting due to the British invasion. New and fascinating things were being brought by bands like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. Additionally, Orlando's signature gentle pop ballads were abruptly out of style. Happy Times Are Here to Stay, his most recent charting track, hardly had an effect, reaching its zenith at 82. By the time he was 19, he had already quit performing since his music was no longer selling. It was a difficult truth to accept. Later on, he claimed to feel like the youngest goody ever to have lived. He had to find a new route because his time in the spotlight had come and gone. He had to provide for his family after getting married young. He then focused on the commercial side of music. He took a risk that most artists wouldn't even think about, rather than pursuing a dwindling career. He accepted a position working behind the scenes at CBS Records. Other than wanting to be a vocalist, Tony Orlando has all he could possibly want in the music business in 1970. At the age of 26, he was in charge of the April Blackwood division at CBS Music and was a prominent executive. He collaborated with renowned songwriters such as Laura Nyro and James Taylor, and he even helped start Barry Manilow's career. His annual salary from his job was $200,000, which is more than $1.4 million in today's currency. He had a history of singing, but he had no desire to return. Then everything changed with a phone call. His producers pals Dave Appel and Hank Medris had a tune called Candida, but they were unable to locate a suitable vocalist. Orlando was requested to record it. At first, he declined. They persisted until he eventually accepted, even though his career was now in business. One restriction was that the song must not contain his name. A fictitious group name had to be used for its release. They dubbed it Dawn. Nobody was expecting much, but when Canada was broadcast on television in July 1970, it was a huge hit. It sold more than 1 million copies and rose to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. There was an issue, but all of a sudden Tony Orlando was the voice of a great popular song. He was still employed at CBS in a lucrative position. All could be ruined if someone discovered that he was working as a singer on the side. Then there was a greater shock. Candida's label, Bell Records, requested a follow-up. It took more than one hit. They required an actual artist to promote an album and another single. Orlando felt conflicted. He had put in a lot of effort to earn his steady executive position. But it was hard to overlook Candida's accomplishment. He made 3 recordings of Knock while continuing to conceal who he was. After its late 1970 publication, it surpassed Candida in popularity in a matter of weeks. The song peaked at #1 on the Billboard charts by January 1971. Now there was no going back. Orlando was now faced with a decision: remain in his lucrative executive position or take the spotlight seriously. He quit his job at CBS to pursue a career in music. Though he knew he couldn't do it alone, Tony Orlando recognized that he had something unique. He needed more than a name on a record, he needed an actual group. He then contacted Joyce Vincent Wilson and Thelma Hopkins. Both have experience working with well-known performers and were great backing vocalists. More significantly, they possessed chemistry, energy, and a presence that could light up a stage in addition to their powerful voices. They all turned into Dawn and Tony Orlando. Their visit of Europe was their first significant challenge. People adored them. This was obviously more than a studio act. Their greatest moment was yet to come, but they had something genuine. Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree was released in 1973. How Large It Will Grow was beyond anyone's prediction. Not only was the song well known, it was also widely played. Its message of hope, second chances, and returning home resonated with people. In 8 nations, it reached the top spot and spent 4 weeks at the top of the US and UK charts. It sold 3 million copies in the United States alone in just 3 weeks. It was listed as one of the greatest songs of all time by Billboard years later. A single huge hit would have satisfied most musicians, but Tony Orlando and Dawn persisted. Songs like Say Has Anybody Seen My Sweet Gypsy Rose were their follow-ups, along with He Don't Love You Like I Love You. They had 19 successful singles between 1970 and 1975, including 3 #1 hits. They appealed to almost everyone with their blend of rock, pop, and soul. Then, in 1974, an unforeseen event occurred. They were offered a TV variety show by CBS. This was very important. Variety shows were one of the most popular types of entertainment at the period. The Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour was replaced in the summer by the Tony Orlando and Dawn Show. It became a hit right away, but nobody knew if it would last. The moment was ideal. People needed something cheerful and lighthearted while America dealt with the aftermath of Watergate. Tony Orlando was the ideal host because to his laid-back personality and signature smile. He also put a happy face inside his name's O when signing signatures. The program included comic sketches, music, and famous guests like Jerry Lewis and Jackie Gleason. Tony Orlando and Dawn became even more well-known as a result of its 3-season run. However, things began to shift by 1976. As Orlando struggled personally, the group's progress halted. He made the decision to leave the limelight in 1977. Although it wasn't a simple choice, it seemed appropriate. Despite their brief tenure at the top, they had a significant impact. The song Tie a Yellow Ribbon evolved into something more. It became a sign of solidarity for soldiers and those awaiting the return of loved ones. As evidence that sometimes the most unexpected artists make the largest impression, their music is still recognized decades after their TV program became a classic piece of 1970s pop culture. Tony Orlando had millions of admirers and everything when he was at the top of his game in the middle of the 1970s. But he was having trouble behind the scenes. There was a lot of pressure to stay up with the entertainment industry's rapid pace. He began using cocaine because he wanted to blend in. It started off as a simple method to relax, but it soon evolved into something more. He struggled with addiction for 9 months, from late 1976 to early 1977. Everything changed with cocaine. It ruined his confidence, muddled his judgment, and harmed his personal life. His once clear career goal was evaporating, his marriage was disintegrating, and his performances were failing. In retrospect, he did not minimize the events. It destroyed my job, my ability to make wise decisions, my marriage, my self-esteem, my relationship with my viewers, and my television program. His musical career was beginning to wane at the same time. In 1976, his group's TV show had been discontinued, and their popularity was waning. The drugs simply exacerbated the situation. It led to mood swings, poor choices, and an unrecognizable version of himself. Then came the year that would almost ruin him, 1977. Rhonda Marie, his sister, died while she was only 20 years old. He had always been close to her, even though she had cerebral palsy from birth. He talked about how much she motivated him and referred to her as his first audience. He fell into a severe despair after losing her. Another tragedy struck before he had had time to come to terms with that loss. His greatest friend, Freddie Prinze, passed away on January 28 at the age of 22. He had thought of Prinze as a younger brother. They couldn't be separated. Orlando was present when Prinze was taken to the hospital. He watched as medical professionals bandaged his friend's head. As his family painfully decided to remove him from life support, he clutched his hand. He would never be able to forget that. He reached his breaking point after suffering 2 tragic losses in a short period of time. The weight of everything he had experienced, the stress, and the anguish were too much. He left the stage during a performance in Massachusetts on July 22, 1977. He just stopped singing and walked away in front of 3,000 fans. There was no plan. He had no intention of making a statement. He simply was no longer able to do it. What was going through his head at the time was later clarified. "Help me," was all I wanted to say. To visit a doctor, I would prefer to leave the stage. He made an effort to continue, but he ended his tour after just 3 more performances. He needed assistance. He checked himself into a mental health facility, where he spent around a year. He began receiving treatment after doctors determined that he had manic fatigue. Above all, he needed time to recover. Fans were taken aback. He had abruptly faded from the public eye, and nobody was aware of the reason. But he was rebuilding himself in that hospital. He resorted to his faith, concentrated on getting better, and gradually made his way back. He was prepared to return in 1978. He started with a TV comeback spectacular on NBC, taking his time. Don't Let Go, a dance success, marked his solo comeback that same year. His continued relevance in the ever-evolving music industry was demonstrated by the song's position at number 39 on the Billboard Hot 100. Orlando managed to stick apart despite the dominance of punk and disco. He continued to be successful after that. Sweets for My Sweet, which he published in 1979, became well known in the United Kingdom. His career took off in a different direction, Las Vegas, as his radio hits decreased in frequency. Orlando established himself as the Strip's main attraction, playing night after night to crowded crowds. His performances went beyond simple concerts. They were extravagant shows that included magic tricks, lavish scenery, and changing costumes. He kept his shows lively and novel by fusing new songs with his timeless hits. At the same time, Orlando faced a fresh difficulty when it hosted the MDA Labor Day Telethon's Fresh York City segments. When he initially joined in 1980, his initial appearance evolved into a commitment that lasted for more than 30 years. Every year, millions of people watched him raise funds for research on muscular dystrophy. Only in 2011, after Jerry Lewis was abruptly kicked out of the Muscular Dystrophy Association, did he leave in protest. Orlando's career, however, encompassed more than just television and music. He made a daring Broadway debut as the lead in Barnum. He had never played a part like that of P.T. Barnum. He was singing more than that. While performing on stage, he had to learn circus skills, magic tricks, and tightrope walking. Orlando filled the position for 3 weeks in May after initially being brought in as a temporary replacement. He was well received by audiences, and his success in Barnum opened up further theater chances. Years later, in 1995, he made a comeback to Broadway with Smokey Joe's Cafe, a musical honoring Mike Stoller and Jerry Lieber's classics. Orlando's voice was ideal for the show's vintage rock and roll tunes from the 1950s and 1960s. The nearly 5-year run of the show demonstrated how popular he was with all ages. Orlando discovered a new mission off of the stage, helping American veterans. He had already become a symbol of hope for returning warriors because to his 1973 hit song, Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree. He eventually transformed that relationship into tangible action, though. He entertained troops at numerous USO performances, visiting military installations and even combat zones. He traveled to Somalia in 1993 as part of Operation Restore Hope to raise the spirits of the troops there. His support extended beyond his stage appearances. Using his celebrity to generate funds and awareness, he collaborated closely with organizations that support veterans. He became a member of the Eisenhower Foundation's board of directors in 2002, where he helped finance initiatives for veterans. His work with the National Veterans Foundation is arguably his greatest enduring achievement. He raised millions of dollars to support veterans and their families during his more than 10 years as a spokesperson. Wayne Newton and Tony Orlando used to be pals, two of the most well-known performers in the industry. However, by the late 1990s, that friendship had devolved into a savage conflict that was demonstrated in court, in the media, and through personal assaults. The two shared a theater in Branson, Missouri, where it all began. What ought to have been a fruitful collaboration swiftly fell apart, resulting in $35 million worth of lawsuits and almost 20 years of silence between them. The controversy started when the TOWN Theater was discussed in December 1998. Newton controlled the building because the lease was owned by his company. At that point, he took action. He claimed to be owed more than $2 million and locked Orlando out on December 4th. It made no difference that Orlando denied it. A man he had previously thought of as a friend had just ejected him from his own theater. Orlando refused to let it pass. He sued Newton for $15 million in April 1999, claiming that Newton had conspired against him, secretly recorded him, and evicted him in order to rename the facility the Wayne Newton Theater. In June, Newton retaliated with a $20 million lawsuit, claiming that Orlando was failing to pay his fair share of costs and was unable to attract the numbers he had promised. Newton claims that Orlando's 750-seat theater was unable to accommodate even half of the audience. Things quickly became ugly. During the lockout, Orlando claimed Newton was holding his daughter's Christmas gifts hostage. In response, Newton charged Orlando with lying to the media. What started off as a business transaction became one of the most heinous feuds in show industry as the lawsuits continued for years. For almost 2 decades, they did not communicate with each other. Newton did not approach Orlando and offer a hand until 2016, during a film screening in Las Vegas. The two began repairing what had been damaged after all those years. However, Tony Orlando had to contend with other challenges as well. He battled with how his music was perceived throughout the majority of his career. Despite having sold millions of CDs, critics wrote him off as a bubblegum pop musician, a moniker that said his music was lighthearted, uncomplicated, and unimportant. Dawn and Tony Orlando were among the most well-known performers in the 1970s. Hit songs included Knock 3 Times, Round the Old Oak Tree, and Tie a Yellow Ribbon. Rock critics viewed them as disposable pop, but fans adored them. That notion was further supported by the group's polished appearance and their family-friendly variety show on CBS. At the same time, the music industry was rapidly evolving. Rock was becoming more rebellious, edgier, and louder. Orlando didn't fit the mold with his songs. His tracks were dubbed vapid and saccharine by Rolling Stone magazine. The criticism stayed with him despite his best efforts to disregard it. He felt too much pressure to uphold his reputation while hoping to be recognized as a legitimate artist. Everything fell apart in 1977. After having a nervous breakdown, he eventually acknowledged that he had been battling a cocaine addiction. He disclosed that the strain of celebrity and the never-ending struggle for respect almost shattered him in his 2002 memoir, Halfway to Paradise. The bubblegum pop label persisted even after he recovered. He took on new challenges, like as a Broadway part in Barnum in 1981, in an attempt to break free. Critics, however, continued to view him as the performer of upbeat pop songs regardless of his actions. Tony Orlando made a choice in 1993 that would influence the remainder of his career. In Branson, Missouri, he established the Yellow Ribbon Music Theater, a 2,000-seat venue that soon rose to prominence as one of the town's main attractions. Over 500,000 people visited annually at its height. Orlando, however, saw this theater as a place to give back, particularly to the men and women who served in the military, and it was about more than simply music. From 1993 to 2013, the theater in Orlando hosted a free Veterans Day homecoming ceremony every November. Every year, thousands of veterans flocked to Branson, transforming the town into a meeting spot for veterans. The effect was not limited to the stage. During these events, local businesses saw a significant increase in revenue, and Branson gained a reputation as one of the nation's most veteran-friendly cities. The mayor of the town formally proclaimed November 8 to be Tony Orlando Yellow Ribbon Day in 2022, honoring everything that he has done for the community. Orlando performed in Branson for 31 years, putting on over 9,000 shows and preserving his greatest songs for a whole new generation when he retired from live engagements in 2024. Orlando's tale, however, was not solely one of achievement. His memoir, Halfway to Paradise, which was published in 2002, detailed the difficulties he had encountered in the background. In the 1970s, his career took off, but there was a cost to fame. He developed a cocaine addiction, and by 1977, his life was becoming out of hand. He had a nervous breakdown as a result of the strain of the music business and his personal issues. He was at his lowest one night, standing on the brink of a hotel room in New York, about to leap. The telephone then rang. His sister was the one. His life was saved by the call. It was a moment of awakening that caused him to reject addiction and turn to his faith for support. The difficulties of his childhood were also made clear in his autobiography. His Greek mother and Puerto Rican father reared him. Even though their cultures influenced him, he frequently had identity issues. He also talked candidly about one of his greatest career regrets, declining the opportunity to record Sugar Sugar, a song that the Archies went on to make a huge smash in 1969. The memoir didn't shy away from difficult subjects. Orlando discussed the traumatic split between Tony Orlando and Dawn, one of the most well-known performers of the 1970s. The group broke up in 1977 as a result of personal disputes and creative disagreements. And he told his side of the tale for the first time. The book's most devastating section, however, was his description of losing comedian Freddie Prinze, a close friend. One of the last individuals to see him before his untimely demise was Orlando. The sadness was too much to bear. However, it also strengthened his conviction that pleasure and success are not always correlated. Readers were moved by Halfway to Paradise. It sold over 500,000 copies and was on the New York Times bestseller list for 12 weeks. It was more than a tale of music or celebrity. It was about redemption, second chances, and finding hope even in the most hopeless circumstances. There has been music, love, and surprising twists and turns in Tony Orlando's life. When rock star Jerry Lee Lewis introduced him to Elaine, who would become his first wife, it was one of the most fascinating occasions. She was a part of music history in her own right, having dated Buddy Holly before to meeting Tony. Although Tony and Elaine were married in 1965 and had a son named John, their marriage ended in 1984, having been together for almost 20 years. After 5 years, Tony fell in love once more. It was with Francine Amormino this time. They are still together after getting engaged and getting married on April 29, 1990. They have a child as well. Behind the scenes, Tony struggled despite his achievements. He had a difficult time once his group, Dawn, hit the top of the charts. Despite being raised Catholic, he lost his way for a spell, he subsequently discussed on the 700 Club. When he converted to Christianity in 1978, everything changed. But he never let his career slow down. He was awarded a star at 6385 Hollywood Boulevard on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1990. He received numerous honors throughout the years, such as Best All-Around and Casino Entertainer of the Year. Additionally, he received the Amusement and Music Owners Association of New York's Jukebox Artist of the Year award. In addition to his musical career, Tony devoted his life to helping American troops. Because of his efforts, he was recognized for his contributions to entertainment and the military with the Congressional Medal of Honor Society's Bob Hope Award. He received additional recognition in 2014 when he was designated honorary chairman at the Richard M. Nixon Presidential Library's 40th anniversary of the NAMPOS Homecoming commemoration. Tony Orlando's tale has always been about more than simply music, despite life's ups and downs. It all comes down to fortitude, faith, and a strong desire to give back.